Okay. And I don't have to be so professional, but, okay, so
Hey,
just
do
let me
your
know your
thing.
name, that's all.
Gloria Jean Tyler-Mallery.
Alright. And, oh, well, when did you come to San Diego? Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay. My father left Texas in 1952, and I'm going to say around February of 1952. And my mother and my sisters uh, relocated April of 1952, and I was 3.5 years of age.
Okay. So you didn't know a whole lot about Texas at that age, or do you?
Well, not at that age,
Mhm.
but because of my interaction with my maternal grandfather and grandmother and visits, uh, I learned a lot about Texas,
Mhm.
and that was considered home,
Mhm.
the country home, but San Diego was home.
Right, right. Okay. Well, tell me a little bit about your upbringing. Maybe, you know, share with me the things that you used to do as a young girl and places you used to go and whatnot.
Okay, well, my we when my mother and my sisters, when we arrived in San Diego, we had a great aunt and uncle that we stayed with to make the transition. And that was the late James and Julia Calhoun. And Aunt Julia was a resident of San Diego from the Scarborough family of San Diego. There were lots of them. And within a couple months, my parents found an apartment in Frontier, and that's where we started our little homing in Frontier. I did my kindergarten in Frontier
Mm.
and met people like the Graham family, Carol Graham, who was a life member at Calvary Baptist Church, and the Hune family, who was a military family, Eleanor Hune. She and I ended up graduating from Lincoln High School together. Betty Sharp, who later changed her name to Hazina, we started kindergarten together. And um, people like Teddy Scales and his family. Uh, we met Dorothy Gibson and Johnny Gibson. Most people in San Diego called Johnny Blue.
Mm.
Um, and that was the childhood frontier. At the time, the housing where we were was former military housing, and it ended up my dad purchased a house off of 41st and Market, and I started first grade at Choice Elementary School. And a couple of my first classmates were from Coleman Meshach, from the Jackie Meshach family. It was his mother. We had James Tate, his mother Grace Johnson, and as this one friend wants to always say to people, he was the white boy in the neighborhood, but the whole neighborhood was white. If Choice had 14 or 1,600 elementary students, there were only 6 Black families at that time at Choice. So
Mm.
we were a minority. But James Inslee and eventually people like um, let's see, Gaynell Hemphill lived on the corner of the top of the hill from us, and she ended up marrying one of the Shaws, and their son David Shaw is now the head coach at Stanford University football.
Wow.
And anyways, there's just a long history because we were there for what I consider so long, and many of us we've been friends all of our lives, and those of us that are still living, we're very close friends. Um, I the one friend, James Inslee, probably in second grade or so, invited me to go roller skating with his church, which was a Southern Baptist church. off of 41st and Broadway. And his mother came to our house and asked my mom if I could go, that her son wanted me to go roller skating with him. I guess I was his first Black girlfriend.
Okay.
And I'm telling you, if you go on Classmates, I mean, James is crazy. He even sent me a note and asked me why Vice President Biden or President Biden didn't select me for his running mate. Because I've
Okay.
always been so political. But it's a lot of fun. But anyway,
Mhm.
I went roller skating, and she also then invited my sister Joyce, and then the neighbor next door, her granddaughter. The three of us went roller skating with the Broadway Baptist Church. And Mrs. Inslee invited us to come to Sunday school. So we ended up going to Sunday school at Broadway Baptist Church, and the minister, um, Reverend Hathaway, eventually, one of his messages, we joined the church. So we were the
Okay.
first three little Black girls to join Southern Baptist, Broadway Baptist Church. And eventually that congregation eventually went over off of Imperial, and I don't remember the name of the church, but they took the Southern Baptist Church over there when more Black families started moving into the neighborhood. We ended up getting a Black minister, uh, Reverend
Oh,
Coleman, and he's the person who started the Mount Sinai Barbershop. And he had a daughter who was same age, Vivian Coleman, and that was our little neighborhood. Um, Connie and I, we started off. We did we did tap dancing, and I took baton twirling lessons. And I had a cousin 7 years older than me who was at San Diego High School,
mhm.
and she taught me to twirl the baton. And there was a drill team in San Diego of girls all her age, um, and I was their mascot. If you can
Oh,
believe, I twirl my little baton. and
wow.
uh, and another one of those girls in that group was a girl named Betty Pryor. And Betty Pryor, we know her now as Betty Bridges. She is the
Mm.
mother of the actor Todd Bridges. And
Oh,
she called me about 2 weeks ago, and you know we laughed because she said, "Here, I was just a little 7 year old, and now we're friends. We have traveled together. I think one of the best vacations we ever had. We traveled to Tortola. We traveled to Tortola in the
yeah.
British Virgin Islands and had a wonderful time. But anyway, back to our growing up. My father was employed by General Dynamics,
Mhm.
and actually, he was hired by Mr. James McCann, and Mr. McCann is
Yeah.
the father of Dee McCann Sanford. And
Awesome.
of course, Dee was an only child, and she was almost 4 years older than me. And she didn't have time for those of us that were younger. But her dad hired mine. And there was another gentleman in the department, Ike Rollins, and Mr. Rollins had a daughter, Mary Rollins, who ended up we graduated the same class from Lincoln High School, and we are to this day still great friends. Um, Daddy became very active with General Dynamics Labor Union, which was um, the International Association of Machinists, and he eventually became treasurer, and he served as treasurer for 13 years. So he was really active politically. And my maternal grandfather came to visit when I was in about second grade, I guess.
Mm.
And he brought us what was then top of the arts, a Remington Rand typewriter. So I
Oh,
learned to
yeah.
type very early, and my father would have me typing things for the union. I grew up doing
Oh,
that. So I got active. And I remember mom and dad were always I mean, they were into all of the politics of San Diego. I remember when George Walker Smith first ran for the school board, and the efforts of my father, his union, and other African American people in San Diego, Adolphus Reed, and
Yes.
Ted Patrick, and others helping him politically. And there's a story, I got plenty of stories, but a story I shared where in 1994, I think, I was in Carthage, Tennessee, when I worked in the music industry, and we were doing a photo shoot, and a gentleman that we had passed by when our trucks and stuff drove into the town was sitting at the general store. And he eventually walked over to the photo shoot and asked me, what were we, he said, what are you people doing? And I said, oh, we're doing a photo shoot. And I explained it was Albertina Walker and on and on.
Mm.
And I then introduced myself to him. I'm Gloria Tyler-Mallery, Director of Marketing. And he said, well, I'm the senior Al Gore. And I said, Senator Gore, the vice president's father? And he said, yes, ma'am. And I was just so, I'm telling you, I was just so taken back. And I said, I remember when I was a little girl, you and Keith Falker and Adlai Stevens. And he looked at me, Yvette, and he said, you are too young to know anything about me and those guys, and on and on and on. And I said, oh no, my mother and father watched all the conventions, early 50s, and that was part of our political our 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 lesson in history and politics. And he anyway, he couldn't believe it, and that's how I got started. And eventually, when I was about 10, my dad came home, and he called me to the table, and he plopped down a phone directory, and he said, I want you to start on page 1, and I want you to identify all of the streets from our neighborhood and call everyone and tell them that Tuesday's election day, and that Mr. Tyler said they need to go to the polls and vote. And that was my first phone banking at the age of 10. So I did that.
And you
And
had
the
the whole
next,
city.
well, we were like from Boundary, Market
Uh-huh.
and Boundary, all the way to 47th Street and
Mm.
above Hilltop. So that was a lot of, those
Yeah.
streets. But that's what I did. And the next year, he came in one day, and he gave me 10 $5 bills.
Mm.
And he told me to organize my girlfriends and give each one of them $5 and pay them to go from Market and Boundary all the way through the community. And we put out literature for the election. And so one thing led to another. And then Mr. Adolphus Reed started um, making sure I got to attend Democrat meetings. And
Mhm.
I got real involved. And then eventually, by the time I was 17, there was a pageant called sponsored by the Democrat Party. And I won the personality popularity part of the contest. And I did so because I raised the most money.
All
And I
right.
had this little title, Miss Democrat, whatever. And so that was that. And but back to elementary school, in 5th grade, we were uh, given the ability to elect our 6th grade class president. And I ran against my best friend,
Oh,
who
wow.
was who was a white girl.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
Donna and I ran against each other. And after the election, we were called to the principal's office, and we had the principal, Miss Jenkins, was the first woman principal in San Diego Unified School District. And she asked me, Gloria, did you vote for yourself or did you vote for Donna? I said, no, I voted for myself. She said, well, we have a problem or a
Oh.
situation. She said, Donna has won the election by 1 vote. I said, okay. So Donna became our class president, but it did nothing to ruin our friendship. And even today, Donna and I mean, she called me for Mother's Day. I mean, we are still friends. We have been friends all of our lives. And
Nice.
that was the beginning of my character. And um,
Mm.
there were some bad times, and I won't mention any names, but there were some girls, some prominent, more prominent than others, that used to pick on me. They used to pull my hair, walk behind me from school, pushing me in the back, wanting to fight me. And um, I had my experiences, but anyway, I went on to Gompers Junior High School, and I think I was seventh grade president. And by eighth grade, I ran for the school, what do you call it? The vice president of the Associated Student Body.
Mhm.
And of course, it was a predominantly white school, so I ran against either two or three white boys. But
Oh,
one of my classmates who had moved to San Diego from Massachusetts, Silas Davis, said he wanted to be my campaign manager. We're talking eighth grade, Yvette. He
wow.
became my campaign manager, and he was so into the theater. And he said to me, "Well, just like Rosalind Russell said in Gypsy, you've got to have a gimmick." And I said, "Okay, Silas." And he said, "And what we're going to do, your gimmick, you're going to um, come dressed as Jackie Kennedy." And I, the day we made our speeches, I wore my aunt's two-piece walking suit, a gray
Okay.
tweed walking suit, and I spoke very softly and very slow. I gave my speech, and at the end of the election, I had beat them boys.
Oh, good.
Eighth grader beating ninth graders, okay? Unknowing to me and my parents, their parents went to the school board of San Diego to have me ousted because their attorneys had checked the school rules or something, and an eighth grader um, could not serve as the vice, as any office in the Associated Student Body. And when my parents were notified, my father said, "Well, why didn't you notify us that they would be appearing so that we could have gone there and defended Gloria?" But it didn't happen. So they made me an advisor in the eighth grade. And then ninth grade, I graduated from Gompers as ninth grade president. So someone
Mm,
asked me once, why are you so interested in pop? That's all I knew. That's all I knew.
yeah.
Even event in elementary school, when my friends were out doing with a play-in or whatever, many times I was into the politics. And I'll never forget a guy named Richard, that was the name he went by at that time, Richard Cheney, better known as Dick Cheney. And he was calling for an embargo of sugar
Mhm.
in South Africa. He was upholding apartheid. And I asked questions. Why is this American man doing this? Nelson Mandela is not a bad man.
Right.
This is elementary school. I'm talking this crazy stuff. It wasn't crazy, but that's where I was. And it just really shaped me. Um, I remember saying at one time, well, let's go on. I graduated from Gompers and then went to Lincoln. And because of the harassment of some people, 10th grade, I just chose not to participate politically. Um, and by the time I got to 11th grade, um, I was interviewed for a job my senior year representing Lincoln on Sears and Roebuck's
Mm.
fashion board, and myself and James Tate, we were selected, the girl and guy, and I represented the school on the fashion board. And during that time, I worked with two girls. Well, one of the girls lived around the corner from us, so I knew Linda. And the other girl, her name was Maureen O'Connor.
Oh, stop it.
Yeah, 12th grade. And they were at San Diego State University, and I'm at Lincoln High School. And we spent a lot of time together. Linda
Mm.
had a trailer right off of Interstate 8, and we would get off from work and we would go to Linda's and maybe drink a little wine.
Right.
She had a pet monkey, and
Oh.
we would the three of us. The three of us would sit there and talk about our goals and aspirations. And I made a statement one Saturday night. I said, "Well, I am going to be San Diego's first Black mayor." And we talked about it, and that's what I was going to do.
Mm.
Um, my goal when I graduated from high school, I had decided in sixth grade that I wanted to be a police officer, and that's what I did. I prepared myself to join the police force, and they didn't open the San Diego PD up until I think it was 1971, but I think over 500 women took the exam, and I ended up number 4 on the eligibility list. I would
Okay.
have been San Diego's first Black policewoman. And Reverend Winters, Timothy J. Winters, who had been a police officer and had,
Mm.
got to know me during the years with all of my parents' activities and knew that I wanted to be a cop, told me he was going to be the one to gift me my first 38 snub nose. And I ended up going to Puerto Rico,
Mhm.
and I came back with double pneumonia.
Oh, wow.
And I was hospitalized for 5 weeks, and I could not get an approval from the health department because of that. I was very disappointed. I was angry,
Mm.
and eventually, um, the I'm going to say the Republican faction of San Diego decided they were going to appoint an African American for Southeast San Diego. Well, there had been a African American person, Jesse Albritton, who had
Mm.
run for city council, but at that time you had your at-large voting, and African American man getting elected, everybody in San Diego voting impossible. But when they
Mhm.
decided to appoint someone, they did not appoint him. They
Oh.
appointed Mr. Williams, and which of course I thought was unfair, you know, but they appointed him. And when he took office, I went to him and requested a position on his staff. And and I'm gonna be very honest with you now. This is what I was told. If I am able to appoint anyone to my staff, the first person I'm going to appoint will be a Black young man.
Mm. Wow.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
I got it. I got it. And uh-huh. Yeah. And he
Okay.
carried that
That's
on. Mhm.
yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it eventually, all during all of this time, at one point, my mother was the youngest woman in the San Diego Women's Civic League, and they eventually elected my mother vice president. So I'm getting all of this uh, character building, community uh, development, community participation because of the things that my mother was doing. And my mother, along with Mr. Jesse Albritton, Clara Brown, Doris Glass, they ended up writing San Diego's first anti-poverty program,
Mm,
and also which included a center that they ended up calling Jobs Now. And that program, after Lyndon Johnson, you know, instructed America, we're going to do this anti-poverty thing. Um, the state of California called the group to Sacramento, and Mr. Albritton and Mrs. Glass um, went to Sacramento, and they were asked, "Who wrote this for you?"
mm,
And their response was, "We wrote it." They thought that some white group had written this thing for these black folks. You understand?
yeah.
Not giving them the credit. And I mean, hundreds of people in Southeast San Diego were able to get jobs at the gas and electric company, the telephone company,
Mm,
uh, grocery stores everywhere. People got jobs through the Jobs Now program,
mm.
and uh, it's just it's just unfortunate, some of the things that have happened that I know for a fact happened in Southeast San Diego. Um, I remember my father and Ted Patrick, and they had, first of all, the Choice View Democrat Club, and then it became the JFK Democrat Club, and then it became the Martin Luther King Democrat Club. And I'm here in San Antonio. I don't know what the name is right now.
Right? It's probably, oh, I was gonna say it's probably the same, but there's always something happening, you know?
Right.
Right.
And we have had a history in San Diego that people just don't know about. For instance, at one time, there were a lot of Black families that lived in Coronado.
Mhm.
And one of the families was, well, I knew the Nowdens, and I don't know uh, other names, but people like Herschel Perry, who was a hairstylist in Southeast San Diego. His mother and the Nowden, the mother, were sisters, and that's where they lived. I
Mm.
think George Morris, their family lived in Coronado. And now that when you check the history of the state of California, we see that just recently in Manhattan Beach, the Bruce family just got property because they had purchased property in Manhattan Beach, which they ended up, you know, I'm forgetting. They Anyway, they took their property.
Right,
So
right.
but anyway, there's Vera Williams, and her grandmother owned property in La Jolla,
Mm.
and the property that she owned included what we came to know as the Saks Fifth Avenue there in La Jolla. And she
Oh,
actually gave them, I think it was a 99-year lease.
uh-huh.
They're leasing from some Black woman.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, interesting. Another of my mother's friends was a woman by the name of Ernestine Nolte. And Mrs. Nolte also at one time, I guess, family lived in La Jolla. And Mrs. Nolte ended up being or working for, employed by the late Ted Geisel, better known as Dr. Seuss.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then you have the Saul Johnson family and
Mm.
the number of African Americans there in San Diego that lived I'm going to say up in the hills, in the mountains there, uh,
In Julian?
in Julian.
Okay, okay.
Uh, the- so, there's just a lot of things. And then we had an influx of educated um, African American people that came in, and they did some things, but I don't think it was a total embrace of the total community.
Mm,
And what I eventually found was that I had more grief coming from people in the community. Um, I eventually went away. Um, and one man in particular, had no dear friend of my father's, he knew what my political aspirations were. And I got a call in Texas that it was time for me to come home, that the person that was now the city council person was not going to run, and it was time for me to come home. And I left Houston, went to San Diego, sat with this person, and we decided I would make an announcement of my candidacy um, on a Sunday morning at Mount Sinai Baptist Church. Well,
mhm,
that person did not show up. And on Thursday, the Black Ministerial Alliance um, had a press conference and announced that they were supporting that person for city council. And that was the person of uh, Reverend George Stevens. And
mm.
it's, um, it's just amazing. Here I am, raised in San Diego, went through the school system, went away, became chairperson of a major uh, uh, labor organization. I represented ramp and reservations personnel for the former Texas International Airlines. I negotiated contracts. I did all of these things. I was a part of the National Assault on Illiteracy. Um, my degree is in criminal justice. It is not in education, but I was a part of it because there was a need. I did great things in Houston with the late Congressman Leland.
Mm,
Um, for illiteracy. And
mm,
all of the things that I did, I always brought it home to San Diego to get people, I thought, motivated, but they couldn't see beyond me. And this was unfortunate. Being in the airlines, I remember when they used to have the um, Black Achievement Awards.
mhm.
Um, Bernard Ashcraft was selling tables, so I reach out. I reached out to the Bahama Tour Board, right? And
Okay.
they contacted a travel agency there in Southeast San Diego and bought a table and came in and supported. Um, and that's what I thought San Diego wanted, you know, someone that could reach out beyond Southeast San Diego. Um, you know, I don't have to name all the people to you at this time,
Yeah, yeah.
but I could pick up a phone and call Naylor Fitzhugh,
Mm.
African American male, down south, but he was the HNIC for Pepsi Cola.
Okay.
You understand what I'm talking about?
Right, right.
And I had been honored by um, the the National uh, Black Caucus of State Legislators, the National Conference of Black Mayors, because of what I was doing. Um, I remember um, I was invited to Gary, Indiana for the first Black uh, economic summit, and they had people put in groups. And when they called my name, I was put in a think tank. And the women in my think tank were Addie Wyatt, the labor organizer, Barbara Williams Skinner, who was the administrative director for the Congressional Black Caucus,
Mm.
Dorothy Hyde. You understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
Along with Camille Cosby
Mm.
and
Okay.
me. And I'm saying, oh my God, how did and a young man from the Xerox Corporation, he came to me and he said, Gloria, you are walking in tall cotton. I said, okay, thank you. but but anyway, that's what I did. And you ask about me, it's like I eventually went to Houston to attend Texas Southern University. And I was in the School of Public Administration, and the dean invited me to come to his office to meet a new hire. And I went over, he said, I want you to meet her because she's from Southern California, and you guys probably got a lot in common. Well, we have more
Mm.
in common than he thought.
Okay.
Ended up, I walked into the office, and this woman is sitting at her desk, and she screamed my name. I said, oh my God, Norma Johnson. And the dean comes running out and he said, obviously you guys know each other. I said, she graduated from Lincoln High School. She's a year older than I. She was a cheerleader like I was a cheerleader. And her brother and I graduated together and we were both cheerleaders. And while we're going through all of this commotion and people are laughing, and a man walked up to me on my left side and he said, excuse me, I'd like for you to come over to the radio station and do a voice check. And I said, sir, I'm not in the School of Communications. I'm in the School of Public Administration. And that brother looked at me and he said, I didn't ask you that. I
Oh.
asked you to come do a voice check. And I said, okay, when? And
Mm.
I went the next day, and which was a Thursday. And that Sunday, I was producing a half-hour talk show called Community Highlights, and it was a part of the gospel programming. And I mean, somebody go to school and study 4 years and don't get a break like that. But
Right.
anyway, I did, and the program became so popular that our mayor, Kathy Whitmire, her brother-in-law was State Senator John Whitmire. And John Whitmire called the university and asked if I could represent Texas Southern University as part of the Texas Press.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness.
are you hearing me?
Wow.
So,
Mm.
so that's how I got into radio. That's how I got into radio. And bottom line is, eventually, uh, they're broadcasting with XHRM 92.5. In 93, I was selected Radio Announcer of the Year with the Gospel
Mm.
Music Workshop of America. And, one thing led to another. But going back to this Democrat convention, being a part of the press, uh, we the party hosted a big press party the Sunday before the convention opened, hosted by none other than Dan Rather.
Mm.
And as we went through his receiving line, he saw my Texas credentials and he said, oh, I'm from Texas. And I said, yes, sir, I know. And he said, as a matter of fact, I'm from Horton, Texas. And I said, yes, sir, I know. And he
Mm.
started laughing and he said, I was born at Caney Valley Hospital. Now we're talking Dan Rather, okay? I said, yes, sir, I know. I said, as a matter of fact, Mr. Rather, everyone born in Horton was born at
Mm.
Caney
Mm.
Valley Hospital. I said,
Mhm.
sir, that's where I was born. And oh, he thought that was so funny. And I said, and to be perfectly honest with you, my family actually lived in Hungerford, Texas. And he said, Hungerford, There used to be a barbecue place. I'm telling you, they had the best barbecue. And he goes through all of these things about this barbecue. And
Oh,
I said, yes, sir, I know. I said, that
uh-huh.
was my grandfather's restaurant. Dan Rather said, Mr. Whitehead is your grandfather? I
Mm,
said, yes, sir. And he lifts up his hand. He started calling for people. And he said, take Gloria upstairs and get her some super credentials. So
mm.
for the 1984 Democrat convention, there was not a party held, an event held, or anything that I did not have walk-in authority on. And I mean, I
Okay.
went to Ted Kennedy's party out on a
Mm,
yacht for the Texas. I mean, it was just unbelievable. It was unbelievable. And it ended up the Republican Party, they're watching the Democrat convention. And there was a piece where they were interviewing the governor of Texas. And I stuck my microphone out to the governor and asked him, a very important question. And the governor asked, the Republican Party then called the school and asked if I could represent Texas Southern in Dallas for the Republican convention.
oh my goodness.
You know, all of that to say, these are the things that happen when God is in control. And
Yes.
when it just happens, you understand? You know how many people would have loved to have had a microphone at the convention and interviewing the governor?
Mm-hmm.
So all of that to say, historically, I I often think about how different things could have been had it not been for envy and jealousy there in Southeast San Diego. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I am just I don't know. I go back to the Women's Civic League and what those African American women did to get the first street lights up on 25th and Market Street and down at 25th and Commercial. You know, Commercial down there, 25th and Commercial. That's where America's finest would take people and beat them. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, but the Civic League, again, we get back to the Civic League. They did those women did some wonderful things for Southeast San Diego. And it was a culture um, where on Sundays they would have teas in the afternoon, fashion shows, um, meals, um,
Yeah.
very inclusive of the community. And right now, I don't know who's doing what in Southeast San Diego, but I know there are many of us that um, that's how we learn to model, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what else you want to know?
Oh, girl. Well, as you were talking, because the whole story, the stories are wonderful. I kind of took some note.
Uh-huh.
Um, First of all, James Tate, was his father the Tate that owned the what
Tate's
is it?
Funeral Home.
Yes, is that the same
Um,
one? His son, by chance?
I don't want to answer that, but
Oh,
but Daryl, Mr. Tate, yes. I just There's just
mm,
some personal things but yes, that's who we knew as Daryl's father.
okay.
And
Okay.
Daryl is Dr. James Tate now. You know that. He's
I
a,
don't even know him.
okay, James Daryl Tate. He's Dr. James Daryl Tate. He is a neurosurgeon.
Mm,
He has his own hospital in Redding, California.
mm,
Um, he's a pilot. He flies his own plane, his own helicopter.
okay.
Grew up at Morrison and Hilltop Drive, went to Choice Gompers in Lincoln. Um, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But he
Gotcha.
would be a person that that you might want to contact for the
Okay.
history. As a matter of fact, Mr. Tate had a house at the top of 41st and C Street,
Mhm.
and we'd see him every day driving his Cadillac home. Hi, Mr. Tate.
Okay.
Oh, what
Okay.
else?
Adolphus Reed. I met him as a young girl, and I
Uh,
guess he was much older, but I just remember him as being really fun, and he always would hand out those little coins on the
yes,
necklace. Yeah.
right, right. Well,
Um, yeah, tell
he
me a little bit more about him because I really didn't know a whole lot about him, and I was just really too young to really know
well, what
anything.
I my experience with Mr. Reed was he was a part of the Democrat Party,
Hmm.
and he was a chronological, mature person. But
Yes.
there were certain events that would be held, and he often would come to our home and pick me up so that I could participate. And I learned from him how a man should treat a woman. As a little girl, he would get out of the car, he would come and open the door for you. If it's raining, he would hold the umbrella over your head. And he was just so kind. You know, I loved Mr. Adolphus Reed, and I often think of his kindness.
Mm.
And again, he was another person that was very committed to his community, to his church. Um, and because I was just a little girl, that was, I saw him at meetings, and I knew he was very active, and often with Mr. Ragsdale
Mhm.
and Dr. Hampton, that used to pastored Bethel Baptist Church back in the day. Um, I remember Martin Luther King coming to San Diego, and we were at Bethel Baptist Church, and Mr. Reed, he was just a good man. That's all
Right.
I you know, I was too young to know more than that.
Yeah.
Other than
Yeah.
he's a good Democrat.
Okay. I think he was from Texas too, actually.
I don't know. I don't remember being told.
I think so. I think so because I had been searching for him. I mean, I knew he had passed, but
Right.
I was looking for him, and I think I found that he was from Texas.
Okay. That I didn't
So,
know. I
yeah,
did.
and I haven't gotten far with that research, but I just found him a wonderful character in my
Yes.
life,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So,
agree. Yeah.
yeah.
It's,
And then
every young girl needs an Adolphus Reed in their life. So you can see what a real man does.
yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you. You helped me see him a little bit more.
Okay.
Um, Other person, Solara Baron. Did you know her?
So Laura, I
Solura, Solura,
so Laura,
Solura.
I knew her because of my father's activities in the Democrat Party or the
Mm-hmm.
Democrat Club. I knew that she was very active. Um, I heard the stories of the in the 40s when Truman was running, and how uh, she became the first African American to be seated with the California delegation.
Mm-hmm.
And I under from what I learned and know of her, that she became very close to Harry Truman. It says a
Oh,
lot. And she lived right there in Valencia Park. Um, Again, another very active uh, person. We've had several women like that. Zanola Maxey,
mhm.
Verna King.
Yeah.
Um, oh gosh, um, Okay. There are others, and eventually they'll come back to me.
Is it
Uh,
Kathleen Harmon? Is she one of them?
well, not that I was thinking of.
Oh,
No, I
okay.
was thinking of some of the older guard, the ones that
Okay.
were in the age group of a Salura or Zanola.
Oh, okay.
Um, there was Bessie Irene Smith.
Mm.
She was one. And oh gosh. Okay, I just drew a blank.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
If you think of them, just shout their names out.
Or I'll write them down. Next time we talk, I'll have them for
Oh,
you.
okay. Um, let me see. You know what? I was doing some newspaper research, and you had mentioned some Democratic clubs. I found something. It was some papers like listing some names on it. The
Uh-huh.
George Stevens Democratic Club. Do you remember that?
No,
Interesting.
I
It
don't
seems to
remember
me
that.
like they tried to form one. Maybe it just didn't go anywhere.
It's possible. It's possible in San Diego.
Uh-huh.
I tell people, and I have no problem saying it, that um, I remember Dr. Hampton and Mr. Ragsdale in their efforts to bring Martin Luther King Jr. to San Diego, and did. And
Hmm.
I remember sitting in Bethel Baptist Church, and it wasn't half full.
Oh,
Yeah. And eventually you have all these people claiming whatever they claim. And I'm thinking to myself, Martin Luther King came to town and you guys couldn't even fill up the church with your own congregations.
mm.
You know,
They snubbed them
yes,
pretty
yes,
much.
yes. And
Yeah.
Coretta came to do a concert,
Mm.
and same thing. A lot of people, well,
Right.
they get in on it on the end, but it took some other people. And I think you mentioned to me in one of our conversations about ECC. Our
Right.
home was within just a few hundred feet from what is now ECC. Actually, they eventually bought the property that my parents owned. They had a corner lot, and now that's part of the school.
Oh,
And then, and you said, I don't remember seeing your mother's name. I said, my mother's name should be. Her name was she was one of the founders for ECC, and I know she was honored for that. So,
okay.
but then you have other people coming into town and they start changing history.
Right.
So,
Right. How much do you know about the planning of ECC?
well, I don't know
What
any
it
of the
is?
details. I
Uh-huh.
just know, and what I know that my mother was a part of them when they decided they needed an ECC. And my mother was part of that group of people that
Yeah.
were instrumental in getting that school built.
Right, right. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a there's there there's a group of people that often participated, and they did things, and they did it from the background. You
Mm.
know, some people and other people come out front, and you think they were the ones who initiated and thought of these things. It's not true, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. Wow. Just you've said so much already. I mean, like even at this point, I'm like, I think that may be enough for right now.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm sure I want to know more, but yeah, but that was really good.
Yeah, well, I would love at some point to introduce you to some of the people that I started kindergarten with,
Mm.
that are still living in. People are saying, "And you guys are yeah, yeah, we're friends
Mhm.
and we'll always be friends. Those are the people that know you. I remember in Houston when the late congressman met me at a function and invited me to join his campaign so I could get the airline employees involved in Houston. And oh God, I just lost my thought. He um, he was saying to me, you know, to go to wherever the headquarters was, and you get there, and his mother is there, his mother's sister is there, his best friend is there, her mother, her mother's sisters, all these, you know, and that's what it is. But again, when we talk San Diego politics, um, there was just some stuff that just we became our own worst enemy. We became our
Yeah,
own enemy.
right. Like I really can't figure out our community here in Southeast San Diego. And it seems like we've all kind of spread out throughout the county of San Diego
Right,
or going east or up north a little bit. Um, I don't know. I just see a new generation coming up and whatnot, but they're not familiar with the history of San Diego or of their area, you know. And
right. Well, you know, as I explained to you earlier, let's call a spade a spade. You have a Republican Party and you have a Democrat Party.
mhm,
And more often than not, you had a Republican Party in charge in San Diego. And I mean, they selected who they wanted to run, and they would move them over into Southeast San Diego. It's no secret,
mm,
or
mm,
you know, select who they want. And I think one of the darkest days for me in San Diego and really being confronted with truth was when I ran the first time for city council. And we had a gathering of people that lived in the district. And so you need 200 signatures. And we get the signatures, and eventually they come back and tell me that one family in particular that lived on Market Street, that they no longer lived at the address that was on the petition.
mhm,
They may not be at that address, but they are still in the district. They just moved
mhm.
a few blocks away, you know. And anyway, I was told that my name would not appear on the ballot.
Mm,
So another person who was being supported by the Republican Party did not have enough signatures. The
mhm,
difference was the persons or people on their ballot were actually from the third district. They weren't even in the fourth district.
mm.
My people were in the fourth district, had lived there all their life, moved from 40, 40th and Hilltop maybe, and moved to Market Street, moved from Market Street to Alvera. They still in the district.
Oh, right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
So my mother's attorney says, okay, we're going to go to court and we're going to get Gloria's name put on this ballot.
Mhm,
Well, the other person also went to court and they gave him a court hearing for Friday at 4 or 4:30. They told my attorney that he would need to appear Monday morning at 8:30.
mhm,
So Friday at 4:30, this other person's name was allowed to be put on the ballot. On Monday morning, now you know you have the two cases, same cases. They could have heard them both on
right,
Friday.
right. No, that's right. Uh-huh.
On Monday, they tell my attorney, that we were now too late because we were within 30 days or something. But that's part of the politics.
Yeah, that was strategic what they did.
Well, yeah, but then
It
that
feels
was,
like it.
well, it was more than strategic. It was cheating. And,
Hmm.
and
Okay, okay.
the person, Mr. Adenauer, who's head of the voter voting, whatever he was, he eventually so-called complimented me for not following through on lawsuit. But my family got together,
Mm,
and in order for me to challenge that court decision, we would have had to have placed a $100,000 cash bond.
mm, mm, mm.
You hear me?
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Now, there is more to that story, but we'll do that at another time. But that's
Okay.
just to let you know that this stuff is going on. Some of the things that are happening right now are only things that have been regurgitated over a period of time. Well, it worked in San Diego. Let's try it over in Arizona.
Mm,
Let's try it over in Georgia. Same thing. And
same
it's
thing.
time for, I actually said, you see all this hair?
Yeah,
I told my stylist, I said, sometimes I feel like I just want to shampoo my hair and dry it
you should. Make sure
and
you
have me
call me up.
and have me and have me one of the biggest gray uh,
Mm,
afros in the world, put on me a dashiki and
mm.
get busy at my age.
Yeah, you would be beautiful. Well, you already are, but I'm just saying, I could see that. Let's do it. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, and I didn't tell you, but when I went through that process with the San Diego PD,
Hmm.
when I was interviewed by two detectives, and they asked me a lot of questions, and eventually they asked me how far I had gone with drugs. And I said, well, I haven't. And one of the guys took a pencil, like this pen, and just flipped it up in the air, slammed it down on the table, and he said, come on, you went to Lincoln, everybody did drugs. And I said, I beg to differ with you, sir. I have never done drugs.
Hmm.
Well, why not? I said, well, I didn't know who I feared the most, God or my father. And he said, well,
Right.
you're going to have to take up. I said, sir, I decided in sixth grade when a man tried to break into my aunt's house where we had a babysitter and kids from Texas. We were all there because our parents were visiting and having fun. And a man tried to break in, and we called the police. And when the police came, there was an officer that showed up, and a Black officer. And that's when
Hmm.
I decided I wanted to be a cop.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I'll take your polygraph. I ain't worried.
Right.
But, someone said, well, you didn't file suit against them? I said, that wasn't where my head was.
Right.
But
Right.
that's what was said to me. So
Hmm.
again, with Southeast San Diego, I have always wanted the best for my community. And it's just, it's just terrible that we who profess to love God and should be loving each other can't come together and do better for our community. I remember when I wrote my mom's obituary, I said that my mother loved Christ, she loved her companion, she loved her children, she loved her community, and she loved her church.
Yeah.
That says it all, and that's what we all should be about.
Yeah.
Come
Thank you,
on,
my dear.
smile. Come on
Thank
and
you, my dear.
smile.
But I'm just feeling it. That's all. I miss your mom. I do.
Well,
She was just one classy lady.
yeah, yeah, she really
you
was.
know. Mm-hmm.
She really was.
It's fabulous. Very kind, very sweet, very
And she
nice.
could cook.
Okay. Oh, I didn't get to enjoy all that, I don't think, but
Well, at the
maybe,
Democrat,
yeah, but yeah, yeah.
yeah, you did.
Okay.
Uh,
Oh, Clarence McCoy, what is his daughter's name? Because I wanted to try to reach out to her. Do you remember?
Last name is Carol.
Okay.
CAR. I have it written down here right now.
Okay.
I have it. I'll get it for you. I
Okay.
will get it for you.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. That's good. That's fine. Well, I appreciate our talk. We'll do it again,
Okay.
you know. But yeah, yeah, you have your stories down.
I, I've lived it.
Flow.
I've lived
Yeah.
it. And let me tell you, having dealt with this pandemic, I
Mm-hmm.
have had lots of time to think about a lot of things. And sometimes, honestly, I do this. I pinch. I said, did I really do that? Was I
Mm,
really there?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just amazing.
I remember, and I don't think I've ever told you this, that I was in Detroit. I was invited to Detroit. They had a special program, and it was with Dick Gregory
Mm,
and one of his salespeople um, was an educator in Detroit, and they had a big. I think there was probably 1,500 people there, but I was seated at the Diaz next to uh, what's her name? The back of the bus, front of
oh,
the
what?
all of this.
Rosa Parks, Rosa.
Rosa Parks.
Yes.
Miss Parks was sitting on my, I think it was she was sitting on my left side, and while we were eating and talking, I asked her. I said, Mrs. Parks, I'd like to ask a question. What kept you from sharing what you were about to do with your girlfriends? And she said, honey, if I had told them what I was about to do, they would have been saying, now, Rosa, you know, and Rosa, you can't do that. And Rosa, she said, so I did what I had to do without them. And I looked at her and I told her, I said, well, I really want to thank you. I said, because you sat on the front of that bus, that kept us from having to sit on the back of that airplane. Because
Okay.
I, I laughed and I said, but you know something? On the back of the airplane, they say that's the safest place to
Oh,
be. But anyway, and girl, I got story. I can tell you about Martin Luther King Sr.
mm,
I have a story about him that you will not believe. And when we do that, we'll have to have a friend of mine, Linda Dingle, a nurse
okay.
down in Tucson. We'll have to have her because she can verify everything that I'm going
Okay.
to tell you.
Okay. Well, we could do a three-way, you know?
Yes.
That'd be nice. That'll be nice.
Okay.
Okay,
All
my
right,
love.
darling. Okay. Well,
Okay.
thank you. And you enjoy
Thank
your day.
you. Okay, and you
Okay.
too. Okay.
And call me
Bye-bye.
anytime.
Oh yeah, you too. Okay. I'm
Okay.
here. I'm here.
Yes,
All
ma'am.
right, love.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye
Talk to you
bye.
soon. Bye-bye.